Cast of the ballot, Mr. Clerk. With 99 members present, the chair sees a quorum. Are there any requests for leave? Representative Dalby, for what purpose?
Leave.
You're recognized.
Leave for Representative Milligan.
Leave granted for Representative Milligan. Leave. So noted.
President Pro Tem appoints the following senators as a committee to escort Governor Asa Hutchinson to the House chamber. Senator Keith Ingram, chairperson. Senator Joyce Elliott. Senator Jim Hendred. Senator Larry Teague. Senator Trent Garner. Senator Jason Rapin.
The Speaker appoints the following representatives as the committee to escort Governor Asa Hutchinson to the House chamber. Representative Michelle Gray, chairperson. Representative Gary Deffenbaugh. Representative Joe Jett. Representative Ken Bragg. Representative Monty Hodges. Representative Nelda Speaks. Representative Bruce Coleman. Representative Megan Godfrey. Representative Joe Cloud. Representative Stu Smith.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Sergeant at Arms, for what purpose?
the minutes of the Governor of the great state of Arkansas, the Honorable Asa Hutchinson.
Mr. Sergeant at Arms, please admit the Governor. Governor Hutchinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to Senate Pro Tem Hickey, Lieutenant Governor Griffin, Mr. Chief Justice, Justices of the Supreme Court, distinguished constitutional officers, and members of the General Assembly. It is an honor to stand before the joint chambers today for my 8th and final State of the State speech. For that reason, please allow me a moment of personal reflection. The opportunity to serve and lead the state that I love has been the highest privilege of my public career. As you know, I was raised on a farm on the Spavinaw Creek near Gravett. I was the youngest of 6 children, born to John Malcolm and Coral Hutchinson. They were married in the Great Depression and understood tough times. They did not have college degrees, but they valued learning and encouraged me to pursue my dreams and, most importantly, to have faith in our Creator who reigns in the affairs of man. But the most important person in my life is a girl I was so crazy about that I hitchhiked from Fayetteville to Memphis on the weekends to see her. Susan has celebrated every victory with me and walked with me through every trial. Let me introduce my sweetheart of 48 years and the First Lady of Arkansas, Susan. Susan has devoted time, energy, and her voice to help the abused and neglected children in our state. Thank you for backing her up. My family is important to me, and I'm grateful my son and namesake is here, Asa Hutchinson III. Today, I'm also grateful for the partnership of the General Assembly. Every once in a while, we may disagree. And you might have thought about dissolving the partnership. But all in all, we have worked together and accomplished a great deal for the people that we serve. Our work together has not been for the faint of heart, but it has been transformative and will impact generations to come. 7 years ago, I took office with a desire to improve the quality of life in Arkansas by improving education, increasing our manufacturing, preserving our outdoor heritage, and supporting our farmers. I wanted to be the jobs governor, and through the work of Secretary Mike Preston, our Economic Development Commission, and our many partners, we have had historic success. We now have the lowest unemployment rate at 3.1% in the history of Arkansas, and a record number of Arkansans working, which is even more important. We have signed 556 incentive agreements that created 25,000 jobs. 81,000 more people are employed now than when I took office in 2015. On my first day in office, as you will recall, I called the CEOs of 6 companies. One of those was Ron Cohen of Sig Sauer. A year later, they opened a facility in Jacksonville, employing Arkansans, and they continue to grow. The long list of companies that have expanded or moved to Arkansas represent billions of dollars of investment. This is a sampling of the companies that have moved here or expanded. Synergy Cargo in Crossett, Nestle in Jonesboro, Aerojet Rocketdyne in Camden, Trex in Little Rock, Envirotech in Helena, West Helena, Vexus Boats in Flippin, Canoe in Bentonville, Resolute Forest Products in El Dorado and Glenwood, West Rock Coffee in Conway, Riceland in Stuttgart, Mars Pet Care in Fort Smith, Drax in Russellville, Tractor Supply in Maumelle, and many others. And the most recent announcement tops them all. Last week, we broke ground on the largest economic development project in state history, the U.S. Steel announcement on the construction of a new steel mill in Osceola. This is another calling card for our state. It means a $3 billion investment with more than 900 high-paying jobs. It means that Mississippi County will be the #1 steel-producing county in the United States of America. And this would not have been possible without the support of the Arkansas General Assembly. You passed legislation necessary to win this project. Thank you for your support. But there is more. In Arkansas, we support our military bases and their missions. That is why we work so hard to bring in the F-35 pilot training mission to Ebbing Air National Guard Base in Fort Smith. This will be an economic boon for Western Arkansas for decades to come. This job creation is possible because of our intentional efforts in making Arkansas a business-friendly state with the right policies in place. But another reason that we have been successful in job creation is that we have made it a priority together to cut taxes. When I came into office, I promised to cut middle income taxes by $100 million. People said it couldn't be done. Well, we did it in the first year. Then we went on to provide tax relief to every Arkansan. We have lowered the individual income tax rate from 7% when I got elected to 5.5% this year. And there is more to come. These reductions return money from the government coffers to the hard-working Arkansans who need this money to pay for the increasing costs of groceries and providing for their family. They need fuel to get to work each day, and tax cuts allow them to have more money in their pocket to invest or spend on the necessities of life that they determine. The cumulative total of these annual income tax reductions over the past 7 years exceeds $1 billion. We did this while also giving teachers raises, increasing funding for education, and creating a record $1.2 billion in reserve funds. In addition, we saw the need for improved roads and highways, so we met the challenge by doing the heavy lifting of passing the largest highway funding plan in history. We saw the need of our foster children, and by actions we gave them hope and improved the services for our foster children. We wanted a more efficient and responsive state government, so we transformed it from 42 departments down to 15. We have reduced the number of state employees by over 2,000 since 2015. We navigated our way through a pandemic, and we kept our schools open because we knew our children needed to be in the classroom. I knew in Arkansas every business was essential, so we never sheltered in place or stopped producing. And these businesses are not only essential for our families, but also for the world. We produce in Arkansas, and the world depends upon us. In the spirit of comity and friendship, the General Assembly and the executive branch came to agreement on most issues during the last 2 years. And when we disagreed, we worked through it. And policy disagreements did not stop the goodwill or our ability to work together. Now, let me pause for a moment and recognize 3 representatives of public servants who have sacrificed and endured extraordinary hardship to get us through this pandemic. They are in the gallery. Let me introduce first Juanita Ellison. Juanita was a senior in high school in Camden when she decided she wanted to teach school. She earned a degree at Southern Arkansas University. She taught at Camden Public Schools and moved to Jacksonville, where she teaches K-5 special education. Juanita Ellison is a dedicated teacher, and she represents all of our teachers who have gone the extra mile to help our students. Please join me in recognizing Juanita Ellison and saying thanks to our teachers across Arkansas. Next, I want to introduce Emily McGee, who will also stand, who is a critical care nurse in the ICU unit of St. Bernard Regional Medical Center in Jonesboro. Emily was the director of critical care and oversaw the expansion of critical care at the hospital during the pandemic. Emily represents our healthcare professionals, who we all celebrate as heroes during the last 2 years. They serve us every day. Let us express our thanks to Emily McGee. God bless you. Our third and last special guest is Trooper Zenda Stab of the Arkansas State Police. Zenda was an assistant basketball coach before she joined the state police. I asked her why she was assistant basketball coach. She said, "I just had to spend time till I turned 21 to join the state police." She is also an MP in the Arkansas National Guard. Without going into all the details, Zenda took heroic actions on 3 separate incidences in order to save lives. In one instance, Zenda initiated the pursuit of a stolen car. When the suspect crossed over to drive against traffic on a 4-lane highway, she executed a U-turn and stopped him head-on with her cruiser. The suspect was traveling 70 miles per hour. Before the stolen car stopped spinning, she was out of her seatbelt, out of the car, and drawing her weapon. The actions of Trooper Stab, at great risk to her own safety, kept the public safe and saved lives. Please recognize Trooper Stab. She represents She represents all those in law enforcement that risk their lives every day for our safety and to enforce the rule of law. So thank you, Juanita, Emily, and Zenda, for your service. Before we move into the future, let's spend a moment reflecting on history. In 1956, the Eisenhower administration laid out a bold plan to change the way Americans moved. The interstate highway system connected all parts of America, even previously remote states like Arkansas. This concept was bold at a time when Americans traveled interstate by train. Investment in the interstate system helped create unprecedented growth in travel, tourism, and business. Without our interstates, companies like Walmart, J.B. Hunt, and FedEx may never have grown into the business titans they are today. President Eisenhower wisely saw where the future of mobility was heading, and his vision made America a leader in that future. Now let's talk about our own future. You have supported our students by giving them opportunities in computer science education that makes Arkansas a national leader. Tens of thousands of more students have an opportunity to choose a path that will make a difference in shaping the world and will provide them a high-paying job. But now, Arkansas is in a unique position to lead in future technologies that will change our world. Today, I am challenging Arkansas to lead in this world of innovation by focusing on the future of advanced mobility. Yes, advanced mobility. This focus includes autonomous vehicles, upward mobility platforms, electric vehicles, and modes of transportation that do not exist today but could be the dream of an Arkansas student right now. Why Arkansas? Why can Arkansas lead in this innovation? Because we have always led in transportation, from entrepreneurs like J.B. Hunt, who started hauling rice hulls from Stuttgart to Northwest Arkansas, and Sheridan Garrison, who started Arkansas Freightways that is now FedEx Freight, and also Steve Williams of Maverick Transportation. We all know that the success of our transportation industry is critical to the economic future of Arkansas. And to position our state for the future, we must act today, because the future of supply chain deliveries will be different tomorrow from the trucks on our road today. So let's keep leading. This past year, between the Delta variant and Omicron, I was able to make an economic trip to Israel. I spoke at the Prime Minister's Mobility Conference. I was preceded on the stage by the Israeli Transportation Minister, who announced that they hope to get a bill through the Knesset that would allow the piloting of autonomous vehicles. Well, I was the next speaker following the minister, and I was able to announce that Arkansas passed a law in 2019, 2 years ago, that allowed piloting of autonomous vehicles. Further, I said the pilot program was successful, and we are now using fully automated vehicles delivering goods from the warehouse to the retail store. It was a proud moment for Arkansas, and it was a joyful moment for me as well. But to accomplish this, it took the work of the General Assembly, the Arkansas Department of Transportation, and the leadership of the private sector. In this case, it was Walmart and Gaddick. We have recruited the headquarters of an electric vehicle manufacturing company, Canoe. And in South Arkansas, Standard Lithium is piloting production of a critical element in the supply chain for electric vehicles, lithium. In eastern Arkansas, we produce the steel that is required for battery casing in electric vehicles. So we are in a good position to shape the future from Arkansas for our nation. In order for us to lead, we need to have electric charging stations across the state. Arkansas is scheduled to receive $54 million over the next 5 years from the federal government for electric charging station infrastructure. Quite frankly, this needs to be accelerated. Oklahoma already has it in place, and we may need to devote state dollars to get it done more quickly. Now, as governor, I won't be here for the end of the story, but together we can write the first chapter. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Arkansas Council on Future Mobility. The Advisory Council will be charged with identifying state laws and regulations that create a barrier to the development and enhancement of electrification, autonomous vehicles, drone delivery, and advanced air mobility in our state. It will examine workforce training, which is a big part of it, accessing federal funding, and will make recommendations before the next General Assembly will meet again next January. In the future, you will have choices to make. You'll have the opportunity to remove regulatory burdens and to pass legislation to advance new modes of transportation that will keep Arkansas in the lead. I encourage you to build on the private sector success we have in this state and allow innovation and new technologies to bolster our future. The businesses that drive these innovations in mobility will be leaders in the future economy. I want these companies to find a home in Arkansas and for our state to be a leader in future mobility. Of course, the reason we are here in this fiscal session is to discuss the budget that has been presented. The budget before you includes increased funding for education, health care, and public safety. It includes increased funding for the victims of crime through the Crime Victims Reparation Program. It provides funding for child abduction response teams and for 2 new drug courts. And even with those spending priorities, we will continue to have a healthy surplus. Most importantly, this session will be remembered for our support of law enforcement. Because of your advocacy and hard work, I'm able to announce my support for the $5,000 one-time payment to every county and city certified law enforcement officer. It should cover other frontline certified officers as well. This will be a one-time payment from our surplus effective June 30 when the fiscal year ends. It is designed to reward and incentivize those dedicated officers who keep our streets safe and our homes protected. The total cost of this initiative in support of law enforcement will be approximately $45 million. Next, you passed Act 786 of 2021 session to create the Public Safety Equipment Grant Program. This was one of the recommendations of the task force on the advancement of law enforcement that I convened after the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent nationwide protests. The task force wanted to increase trust between police and our communities and to improve the training, equipment, and pay for our law enforcement officers in a better way. The grant program has received applications for funding to purchase everything from body cameras to bulletproof vests. We have about $5 million in equipment requests from cities and counties, but we don't have $5 million in that grant program. I recommend $10 million of one-time funding from our June 30 surplus to adequately fund the $5 million in application and another $5 million for new requests from our cities and counties. Currently, our law enforcement is underfunded, underpaid, and underappreciated. The actions of this General Assembly to fund more, pay more, and to appreciate more will send the unmistakable message that in Arkansas, we support and value our law enforcement officers. As part of this effort, our budget will significantly increase the pay of our state troopers. Colonel Bill Bryant has been a star in leading the state police, and the troopers are deserving of a more competitive salary. The troopers not only patrol the highways, but their SWAT units are regularly deployed in crisis situations across the state. They back up local law enforcement in the response and investigation of violent crime. I am very proud of their dedication and professionalism. So while some across the country advocate for reducing police funding, we are doing the opposite. We are increasing support and affirming that the first duty of government is public safety. I also challenge our counties and cities to step up to the plate and do more. Police funding must be a priority at every level. Currently, we have a record backup of state prisoners in our county jails. This limits the counties and cities and their capacity to enforce local laws. This backlog must be remedied, and for that reason, I recommend another one-time investment from our surplus to fund a new 498 inmate prison facility. Now let me
The House will come to order.
Now, Let me emphasize that this need for a new facility is not a reflection of a change in incarceration policy. It is simply the fact that we have a growing state and that we are growing in projections at 1.4% over the next few years. My finance team, led by Secretary Larry Walther, conservatively estimates that we will have a $500 million surplus on June 30th. We have sufficient room to address these urgent public safety needs. And yes, if the surplus continues to grow, then there will be an opportunity next year to return part of the growing surplus to the taxpayers. That is your decision. As to the state of our state, I'm grateful to say that Arkansas is leading. We are leading in computer science education, technology innovation, agriculture, tourism, job creation, and support for veterans and law enforcement. Sure, we have more to do, but our state is blessed. And our nation is blessed as well. I think back in my lifetime, and I can recall the division and protest of the Vietnam War, the turmoil of Watergate, the assassinations of presidents and civil rights leaders, and the bitter political fights in Washington. If you simply concentrated on those tragic moments in our history, then you might be discouraged about America. But I also remember and lived through the Berlin airlift, the Cuban Missile Crisis, when our leaders stood tall against the Soviet threat. I witnessed Neil Armstrong land on the moon to win the space race, and I saw the fall of the Berlin Wall. I observed from a very personal standpoint how we all came together as a nation after the 9/11 attack. These moments in history remind us that leaders make a difference and that we can do more and earn the respect of the world when we are united and when we are following the better angels of the American spirit. Leaders can appeal to the instincts of fear, or they can lead with hope. In today's world, and yes, in Arkansas, let's join together to bring out the best of our fellow citizens. I've never been more hopeful and optimistic about the future of our state. Let's work with courage to unite, inspire, and lead with hope. Thank you, and may God bless the state of Arkansas and give us courage to keep America strong, united, and free. Thank you.
Representative Meeks, for what purpose?
Motion, please.
Let's hear your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move the joint session of the House and Senate be adjourned.
That's a proper motion. It's not debatable. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The joint session is adjourned.
How are you doing today?
How are you?
Good, good. Good morning. Afternoon. Thank you for joining me today for today's weekly update, and we're focused on COVID and Omicron today. I want to thank Dr. Jose Romero for his leadership and for being part of this today, as well as Secretary Johnny Key, and he'll have some comments about our schools. First, let's just review where we are. Right now, active cases have doubled since the last week. 1 week ago, we were at 32,000. Today, we're at over 64,000 active cases. Hospitalizations have increased by 373 since last week. Now we have over 1,100 hospitalized with COVID. Pediatric hospitalizations, which Dr. Romero watches very closely, have increased this month. We have 50 this month so far, as compared to 41 last month in total. And of course, we're only on the 11th day of this month. Our response to this rapid increase of COVID cases and Omicron spread is that we have increased hospital capacity. We have $50 million approved by the steering committee yesterday. The legislature will be taking action on this. This will provide us with 265 beds. I had the mark of 1,000 when action would be taken. We've taken that action, and that should assure us of having a space into the next week or so anyway in terms of hospital capacity, and we will take action as needed beyond that. Secondly, we've increased access to testing. The Arkansas National Guard has been deployed across the state to assist in PCR testing, assisting our hospitals, and you can see here the different areas in which the National Guard is deployed in helping with testing through our hospitals. In addition to that, and you'll see they have some great pictures of our National Guard at work that you can see in different capacities supporting our pandemic response. In addition, though, we've tried to increase the rapid tests that are available for in-home use. And those have been available, of course, through retail establishments at a cost. We have ordered over 1.5 million for Arkansas. They will be delivered periodically as the supply allows that to happen. We've received 211,000. Today I mentioned that we'd received 393,000 in addition. They're actually en route to be here and hopefully will be here tonight. But that would give us in hand over 500,000, actually 600,000 that we will be distributing to our communities. Don Adams is here, who has coordinated the distribution of these these at-home tests, and done a great job on it. He told me that the Garland County Library is an example of where we have them in hand. They distributed over 300 at-home tests very early, and they expect to have 1,000 distributed during the course of this day. That shows the significant demand for these at-home tests. The map of the locations of these where you can get the at-home tests is on the Department of Health website. You can go there, you can see where they can be available. In addition to our response in terms of testing and hospital capacity, we've increased the vaccine clinics through our communities and through our schools. I was pleased in a number of places across Arkansas, you see advertised or you see marketed vaccine clinics being held on the weekends and making it available for everyone. And so the message is clear that get vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated, wear a mask to protect yourself and others. But the best solution is to get vaccinated. While that does not eliminate every possibility of you being infected, it does diminish greatly that chance, and it diminishes the chance of hospitalization or severe illness from it. Omicron is here. It is here. It is raging across Arkansas. But what we see from the data internationally and nationally is that this will pass through. And so we're anxious for that to happen, but we've got to hold the line. We've got to make sure we take the action so we can get through January into February, where we expect to see this variant diminished significantly, just like it has in other countries. What is important is that we get vaccinated, we get tested as needed, and take the precautions that your particular situation dictates. What we can't do in Arkansas is to close down in-classroom instruction in our schools. It is critically important for the well-being of our young people, for their mental health, for their development, for their education, and for the stability in life that in-classroom instruction provides. The second thing we can't do is we can't argue for shelter in place for families with unvaccinated children. Can you imagine if you've got a nurse that is told they need to shelter in place because they have unvaccinated children? We need these people in the workplace, we need them in the healthcare facilities, and we cannot be sheltering in place and considering that as an option. And then thirdly, you can't stop living. You can't be calling for suspension of public interactions. That's not where we are in our society today, and it's not what we need to do to get through this. We need to take the other precautions that I've identified, including getting vaccinated. That is important. The message is simple: get vaccinated. And that's an important message for Arkansas. And then I wanted to mention the hospitalizations for a second. There's been some national stories on this, and I asked the Department of Health to do a survey, a one-day glimpse in time, as to how many in the hospital for COVID are there because they went there because they were sick and ill and had symptoms of COVID, versus going there for an incidental or other reason and then being tested in the hospital and being identified as having COVID. And that one-day glimpse of time survey that was taken, 30% of the hospitalizations that were accounted for COVID in that day were actually incidental. In other words, they went to the hospital for another reason, and they were tested for COVID, as they should, and they were positive, even though they might not have been symptomatic at that point. And the reason the statistic is still relevant is because that's the way we've been doing it from day one. But secondly, that if someone is in the hospital for another surgery or for some other reason, they still have to be treated as a COVID patient. They have to have the PPE that's necessary. The hospital has to take the precautions. They have to have a level of isolation. And so it is appropriate to count that, but it's also important for everyone to understand that distinction. And since day one, I've tried to share information with the public, and this is a bit of information I think is important and puts things in perspective. And then I'm actually going to reverse the order today, and I'm going to go through my slides on the cases count for today. Then I'm going to ask Secretary of Education, Johnny Key, to come and talk about some more flexibility for the schools. But let's look quickly at our case report. As I said, 7,756 new cases. Active cases are over 64,000. Very sadly, 25 new Arkansans have passed away because of COVID. Next, we've given out 7,815 doses, and which means that in the last 24 hours, that's our vaccination rate. With this level of increase, with this level of spread of Omicron, that number needs to be higher. I can only think that the public sees this as not as worrisome as Delta, and there is some truth to that. But if you want your schools to operate, if you want people to be able to work, it helps us to increase the vaccination rate in Arkansas. Hospitalizations have gone up 80, and so we're over 1,100. That's a very big increase. We probably will continue to have increases in hospitalization over the next week. Ventilators have gone up 16. Testing is very high. That's very close to the high point of testing since the very beginning of the pandemic. One day was over 20,000 in time past. You can see the counties and how dramatic Pulaski County is. 1,529. And here's just as I mentioned, you can go to healthy.arkansas.gov and you can see the locations that the at-home tests are being distributed. I should add, they're free of charge. They do not cost you, and this is where you can go. There will be a limited supply, and there's limits as to how many can be given out. It's all dependent upon supply. We want to make what we have available to all Arkansans. Vaccination status of Arkansans by age category. Let's just look at the 65 and older on the right column, and you can see in the green that is the percent that is fully boosted, and that is 43% is fully boosted. 31, the yellow is those are fully vaccinated, the red is not fully vaccinated. And so that's 76% is either fully vaccinated but not boosted or boosted. And you can see that in the different age categories. Obviously, as you go down in the age categories, those that are not fully vaccinated increases, and those are the numbers that we worry about, and those are, quite frankly, the growth in cases that we see. Hospitalizations, this is just a comparison of the Delta peak. So on the left, this first hump is the Delta peak, and you can see the yellow is the hospitalized, the red is the in ICU, and the blue are those that are on ventilators. And then you compare it to where we are now and this type of increase that we have and growth that we have under the Omicron variant. And you can see how steep the hospitalization has been in the last couple of weeks. Next, just to show the 7-day rolling average of cases. You can see the growth in those. Next, you'll see what I like to show again, just look at hospitalizations, and almost 86% of those that are hospitalized because of COVID have not been fully vaccinated. And that's what is the data point that should catch everybody's attention. 7-day rolling average of positivity, we're at 30%. So it's very high in terms of positivity rate. And with that, let me first ask Secretary Key to come and talk about the relief and flexibility that we're providing the schools in regard to contact tracing. And then I'll let Dr. Romero back clean up today and to finish.
Thank you, Governor. In light of the recent numbers, and many of our districts have been seeing a very large spike in the number of cases that they've had, not just with students, but with also their staff. They're running into difficulties with just keeping up with the calls, keeping up with the data entry. And so working with Dr. Romero and his team, we have created some opportunities for flexibility with through prioritization to their responses when they have these types of situations. The first priority, obviously, is we want our school districts to identify the positive cases and report those cases to the health department, and then making sure that those individuals are excluded from the school setting. Then the second priority is to identify the individuals with symptoms and make sure they are removed from the school setting so they can go and get tested. And then the third priority is to identify individuals in the school who are obvious contacts to those positive cases and getting them off campus for the recommended quarantine period. For this time being, until the district experiences a slowdown in the surge that they are seeing, these probable close contacts do not have to be reported to the health department on the probable close contact form. And that's where much of the work, much of the overwhelming burden is occurring, is in that reporting process. In addition, any district who has a universal mask requirement in place can forego identifying the probable close contacts in their district, with the exception of those settings of high transmissibility, such as athletic or other activities, that extracurricular activities where the individuals are unmasked and where there's close contact with those individuals. That is an area where identifying probable close contacts should continue. And we believe that this will provide some immediate relief to those districts who are encountering just an overwhelming number of reporting burdens and tracing burdens right now. So with that, I'll turn it back.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Secretary Key. A couple of comments today on the testing. So tests are available. They're being given for free in our local health units, our libraries, and our partners. It's important to note that if you have symptoms and a test very early, you need to follow that with a second test. That's why individuals that are coming in are being given 2 tests, 6 tests for a family. Make sure that you double up on that and double check yourself a day or 2 later to make sure you haven't become positive. Use your mask until then. It's also very important that if you test positive, you follow the CDC recommendations for quarantine. Right? So knowing that you're positive, you then remove yourself from the community so that you don't spread the virus outside. Anybody really going public should be using a mask at this time. That is your safest way of protecting yourself, even if you've been vaccinated, and more so if you have not. And lastly, with regard to children, I want to stress that this is, again, not a benign disease. We're learning more and more about this virus and its long-term complications. Last week, a report by the CDC showed that children that have had COVID are at greater risk for developing diabetes mellitus, that's sugar in the blood that requires insulin use. Now, that has to be further substantiated, but 2 large studies document and support the data that already exists for adults. So again, parents need to take this into account when deciding when to vaccinate and if to vaccinate their children. I strongly recommend it. I have to say, unfortunately, in our state, only 10.3% of children between the ages of 5 and 11 are fully vaccinated. So we have a long way to go. And again, use of masks in school. Thank you very much, Governor.
With that, we'll take any questions.
This year, because there's no emergency in place, the schools are limited to 10 AMI days that they can use for virtual instruction. Do you foresee that being a problem, and are you considering anything to give schools more flexibility on going to virtual?
I'll let Secretary Key, you want to address that first, and I'll think of an answer.
So yes, under statute, for alternative methods of instruction, they are limited to 10 days. Also under statute, districts have to build in 5 makeup days at the end of their calendar. Districts have 15 days total within which to work, but there's also the option of the old-fashioned makeup day. That is not off the table, and it is something that districts can do if they need to make up time, also make up days by adding an hour to their day. That is also an avenue that is available to them under current state law. So we will continue to monitor the situation and keep the governor apprised if any further action is warranted.
Let me just add that I'm impressed with the desire of the educators in our state to make sure that we stay open for in-classroom instruction. We know that when there's some circumstances that you have to go briefly to AMI, but they know the importance of that in-classroom instruction, and so they're committed, and we want to be able to help them get there. Staffing is a challenge with the absences that we see for school staff. And when one school I talked to had 25%, I believe it was, of the staff out one particular day, that makes it hard to function. And they're covering it in different ways. But I encourage those that might be a retired teacher, those that might be in a point in life that they're qualified to be a substitute teacher or to to help staff, make sure you're on the list to support our school system. And if you haven't thought about that, you haven't done, please consider it, because this is a time, for the next month we can really help our schools. And if you have got the qualifications to work in the school environment, let's take advantage of that and offer yourself, because it'd really be a great public service to help our schools. Next question.
We know that cases in schools are continuing to spike just, like everywhere else right now. And Dr. Romero just said that kids ages 5 to 11, only about 10% are vaccinated. You also said that about 30% of people who are just going to the hospital for something else find out they have COVID and they didn't know they had it. So there's a lot of people that could be spreading it. They don't know they're spreading it. A lot of parents are concerned they're sending kids to school, and that it could spread more as cases rise. What would you say to those parents, and what is being done to limit that spread?
Well, the vast majority of the students that you worry about are eligible for a vaccine. And so I would say to the parents, have your children been vaccinated? Have they got the shots that they are able to get? And that's the first thing. It's a very simple answer. And so that is the vast majority of protection you can have in the schools. And sure, there's always a chance of it being conveyed anyway, despite the vaccination status. But as you can see from the statistics, that protects you from serious illness and reduces the odds significantly of being infected. And so that's a very simple response that the parents can have.
Can you speak on the increased demand of N95 and KN95 in relation to students in schools and the accessibility of those masks to students, since regular masks and cloth masks are no longer recommended?
Well, there is some protection, but that's the reason we sent, they're not N95 or KN95, but they're high filtration masks that were previously sent. They very well could be used up, but the schools can acquire those higher level filtration masks. They've been given funds for those purposes, and we encourage them to make those masks available as needed. Johnny, do you have anything else on that?
Yes, right before I came over, my team notified me that we have another shipment of 300,000 masks that should be shipped Thursday, distributed directly to the school districts. And the manufacturer in Mountain Home is ramping up, getting additional material. So the department is providing masks again, as we did back in the fall, and we'll continue to monitor the availability of those. But as the governor said, districts do have funds. Their ESSER funds are for specifically that type of purpose. So we would also encourage districts to look at that to meet their needs.